What happened in the Republic of Ireland when it got its independence? Is that all is all property there owned by the state or the church or what?
All the land in the Republic is owned by the state, which makes all the freeholders in Ireland medieval serfs. And
so they're no better off either.
They're no better off either. The land of the Crown was transferred to the Republic. The mess in Ireland is much worse. The 1925 Land Act here scrubbed a lot of the medieval rubbish on the statute book. The Irish never did it, and they're only now starting to address laws that were made in 1260.
Do they still apply?
Absolutely. This is how that law originates, that giving the actual land to the monarch.
So the laws passed here in 1260 still apply in independent Ireland of 2006?
Absolutely. They're on the statute book.
This question from Steve. Could the Queen sell her land? Could a future monarch, short of a bob or two, decide to flog off Alberta or New South Wales or Milton Keynes? If so, is it worth anything? And if not, does she really own it?
Now, there's no immediate market in whole states, but we're going into a terribly mercantilist era. And in a sense, there is no reason why the Queen shouldn't or couldn't sell off her interest. It's the superior interest. It's in places like Canada and Australia, it's the Crown you actually pay the money to. Now, I don't know whether it actually reaches Buckingham Palace. We're trying to investigate that. But so that money, in theory, is hers. So, yeah, in theory. But at the moment, there isn't a kind of stock exchange in small countries.
If at some future stage Australia were to decide to go its own way and become fully independent and elect their own president, for example, would your advice then, based on what happened in Ireland, be to start again, follow the example of the United States?
Yes,
and how would that work in practice?
That would be, well, first, and this is a tricky one because it's never really, when it happened to the Irish Republic, nobody thought, these people make mistakes, it doesn't work automatically. Nobody thought about the implications. The world has changed, it's become much more commercial, it's become much more legal. Now, I don't think Australia can take over the Crown land, that's to say all of Australia, without paying compensation to the Queen. It's hers. So,
interesting. Nightmare for future generations. Ian in Bristol says, can the Queen come round and cut her lawn then?
Probably. Try asking.
John in Watford, was Kevin's first book about who owns Britain very short? In other words, 2 words, the Queen.
No, I dealt mostly with freeholders and holders in the first book.
Okay, and just explain again the difference there.
Yeah, there's only one landowner in the United Kingdom, one legal one, that's the Queen. A freeholder, which most families are because they own a home, has an interest in an estate in fee simple. It's a way of separating the way you live in the house from owning the land. You are not the owner of the site. The Crown is.
Have you looked in your book at this, the history of property, the history of ownership? Because in some circles, it's sacrosanct, isn't it? This is a very, very important privilege.
Simon, I was hoping you'd ask that question. I looked at the history of land ownership for 10,000 years. That's to the remotest record available. The curious thing is the first record ever available in a tablet of clay is actually a land transaction. But for all of that, for almost all of the 10,000 years of recorded history, the human race, ordinary people, have never owned anything. On average, ownership of the land of the planet has been held by about 1 to 3% of the population. The other 97% owned nothing. Now, that situation prevailed in the United Kingdom as recently as 120 years ago, where even freeholds were almost unknown.
So at what stage in this country, then, if you've looked at the last 10,000 years, did the land become consolidated under the monarch? Because that's comparatively recent.
Right, it was consolidated under the Roman Emperor when they invaded. Then it fell back where people did own in the period in between, and it went back to absolute ownership by the monarch in 1066 and subsequent years. So it's been about 900 years here in the United Kingdom, gone back to the normal situation of, a monarch or somebody, and the ordinary people owning nothing.
You start the book with an apology, the fact that the book wasn't written at the beginning of the 19th century. Why?
It would have been much easier to write the book at the beginning of the 19th century, because the world was much more heavily divided into empires. And where you've got an empire, it's simple. The emperor owns the lot. And I don't understand why nobody wrote it, but it goes back to your question. The owners of the earth don't want ordinary people to know about this ownership. That's really at the bottom of it.
I'm speaking to Kevin Carl, who's written Who Owns the World? The Hidden Facts Behind Land Ownership. The most astonishing detail. There must have been times as you work through country by country, Kevin, you must have regretted even starting this process.
Absolutely, Simon. Is it just 3 o'clock in the morning, it's a good thing there was no gun in my house.
Is it just you that's worked their way through every state and every country?
No, I was inspired by a couple of people and by a wonderful American professor aged 87 called Jack Powelson. Jack did a sort of survey of most countries, but not all. My daughters helped, and my wife helped. They all did bits of it.
I think the word labour of love, though, should be applied to this.
I think so far.
Some questions from listeners. Since the French overthrew their monarchy in a populist revolution, which they put in inverted commas, who owns the land there? That's Michelle in Walthamstow.
The French government say that it is the same as the United States. If you've got a cottage in France, you own the site. That's what they say.
And is that true?
It's not clear in law. No, the French legal system isn't clear on it.
Right. It sounds as though that's quite a big thing not to be clear about.
Yeah, it's a lot of British people buying places in Spain. Now there's where it really... The Spanish government claim that the same situation applies. It's not in their constitution. And a lot of British people buying places in Spain have found that the local council can grab their land. And the Spanish land registry is about 15% complete. The land registry in England and Wales is 50% complete, so 50% of the country isn't in it. But in Spain, there's a really, really obscure situation.
Does it make any difference whether, if there is one big landowner in each country, and it's either a monarch or the state, practically speaking, it doesn't make any difference?
On a day-to-day basis, if the rule of law is reasonable, it doesn't make a lot. It adds, as I said, to complexity, diminishes you as a citizen. But day-to-day, but in an emergency, you are at risk. You do not have proper protection. If somebody else, the state in particular, declares an emergency, rolls the bulldozers, and you're out.
Not much we can do about it, then?
Well, in a proper state, there would be proper rules about compensation, and the person who owned the house would own the site.
Ian, on the M1, I've just bought some land in Greece. Or have I? He says. He thinks he has.
The Greek constitution is like the Spanish one. They had a monarchy, and it isn't clear. The constitution simply doesn't address the issue of land. This is the way most countries get around it. They say, they recognize property rights and the rights to property, but they don't mention land. And the Irish constitution is the model. Property is recognized, and then you find in the small print that excludes land.
We revere property, don't we? Really, I mean, it's it's a sign of whether you've achieved something in life as to whether you own a house or a flat. Take freehold. By having a freehold, you're putting yourself on a par with the lords and the aristocrats of history. They were there and they were powerful because they had land and nobody else did, even if they held it from the crown, which they all did. But you're now on a par. Ordinary people are on a par with the lords and aristocrats of history. And making sure the site is in the hands of the person who owns the house consolidates that. It is very important. You sound at times, Kevin, like a digger from the 17th century. When they believed
for the people.
Yeah, absolutely. They believed that the earth was a commonwealth, a treasure for all.